I could never have imagined my wife would offer me an open relationship. And honestly, I wasn't sure what to think about it at first. But let's take this story slow, piece by piece. Where do I even begin? Olivia and I had been married for more than 10 years, and things were okay. Nothing spectacular, but not terrible either. Just steady. You know how it is? The usual routine, work, bills, the occasional movie night if we were feeling spontaneous. But of course, okay wasn't enough for Olivia. Apparently, okay was just code for boring. At least, that's how she saw it. And that's where everything started to go south. We hadn't had that spark in a while. Sure, the intimacy had slowed down. I won't deny it, but I never thought it was a big deal. Honestly, I didn't even realize there was a problem. I guess I missed the memo she'd sent to herself. She'd drop little hints here and there, nothing too obvious. Stuff like, don't you think our lives could use a little more excitement? Or wouldn't it be fun to shake things up? I brushed it off, thinking maybe she just meant taking a trip or picking up a new hobby together. Normal couple stuff. Then one night, while we were sitting on the couch, half watching some Netflix show, she hit me with the bombshell. Out of nowhere, she said, "Ethan, I've been thinking, what if we opened up our marriage?" I honestly thought I'd misheard her. I figured maybe she was joking or something. An open marriage? Like sleeping with other people and talking about it like it was just another dinner conversation? I'm not uptight. But seriously? This was Olivia, the woman who would get jealous if a waitress so much as smiled at me. And now, she was suggesting we sleep with other people? I was completely stunned. All I could say was, "What the hell are you talking about?" But she was dead serious. She went on, like she had been rehearsing this speech for weeks. She said it was all about trying something new, bringing excitement back into our lives. We'd still be committed to each other, but we'd have the freedom to explore, intimately. She even said intimately like it was something you'd order off a menu at a fancy restaurant. Not a complete game changer for a marriage. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My mind was racing. I kept thinking, has she already met someone? Is there another guy who's convinced her this is a good idea? I started firing questions at her. Is this about someone else? Who are you talking to? Are you already seeing someone? But Olivia just sat there, cool as a cucumber, dodging every question like a pro. "No, Ethan, it's not like that," she said. "I just think this could be good for us. A way for us to grow together." Grow together? Yeah, sure. Nothing says teamwork like sharing your spouse with strangers. The more I tried to discuss it, the more she shut me down, making me feel like I was the crazy one for not being open-minded. She twisted my words, made me feel like some outdated caveman who couldn't adapt to change. And every time she called me closed off or said I was afraid of change, it felt like she was tearing apart everything I thought our marriage stood for. I didn't know who to talk to about it. It's not the kind of thing you bring up at a barbecue, you know? So I turned to my best friend, Ryan. I told him everything, expecting him to back me up, but instead, he hit me with some new age nonsense about how a lot of couples are doing it these days. Maybe I should try to see things from Olivia's perspective, he said. Could be an adventure, he suggested. An adventure? Yeah, like jumping out of a plane without a parachute. The worst part was that Olivia acted like nothing was wrong. She talked about this open marriage like it was a done deal, like we'd already agreed on it. She'd say things like, "Once we get the hang of it, you'll see how good it is for us. We'll be closer, trust me." And she'd smile this infuriating smile, like she was handing me some kind of twisted gift. It felt like I was the one losing my mind. She'd grown distant, spending hours in front of the mirror before work, picking out clothes she never used to care about. Then she'd get home late, saying she was working overtime or out grabbing drinks with colleagues. And all the while, she kept pushing this narrative that this was the solution for our marriage. Living with her felt like living with a stranger who had hijacked my wife's body. Every word she said felt like a slap in the face. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what went wrong. Was I really such a terrible husband? Had I missed all the signs? Or was she just bored with me? Part of me wanted to grab her, shake her, and scream, "How do we get here?" But another part of me, a quieter, tired part, was just done. Tired of trying to figure out what she wanted. Tired of feeling like nothing I did was ever good enough. And the worst part? Knowing that no matter how much I argued or pleaded, Olivia was going to do whatever she wanted, whether I liked it or not. Ever try to convince yourself that something you know, deep down, is complete and utter nonsense might actually be true? That's what I did. I spent weeks walking around like a zombie, replaying Olivia's words in my head over and over. I didn't want to go along with this open relationship idea. It felt like I was selling my soul just to keep the peace. But at the same time, I was desperate to hold on to any shred of normalcy I could find. Maybe I was just outdated. Maybe this is how marriages are supposed to evolve. Pathetic, right? Eventually, I caved. I don't even know how it happened. Maybe I just got too tired of fighting, or maybe Olivia wore me down with her endless speeches about how we needed this. One night, I finally said, fine, if this is what you want, then we'll try it. She was over the moon, acting like I'd just agreed to a weekend getaway. But this wasn't the end of the destruction of our marriage. No, Olivia wrapped her arms around me, kissed me, and whispered, "You won't regret this." The irony was impossible to ignore. That was the first time she touched me like that in months. It made me feel used, like I was just a piece in some game she was playing, and I was the pawn that finally moved exactly how she wanted. I tried to play along, to pretend that I was the modern man, open-minded and accepting of all this. But inside, it felt like something was slowly rotting away. Every day, I woke up with a pit in my stomach, filled with fear, anger, and a deep sense of self-loathing. But I tried to hide it. I wanted to be the kind of guy who could accept this, the kind who could adapt to the new rules of our relationship. I kept telling myself that maybe this would work, that maybe it would save whatever we had left. But it didn't. It just made everything worse. Olivia changed almost overnight. It was like she'd suddenly shifted into someone else, someone who didn't even see me anymore. She started putting a lot more effort into her appearance. Suddenly, she was going all out to look stunning. Not just put together, but full-on seductress vibes. Tight dresses, perfect hair, makeup that screamed, "Look at me." I'd watch her leave the house, and instead of thinking, "Wow, my wife looks amazing," I'd wonder, who was she trying to impress? The late nights started piling up, too. She'd come home later and later, always with some excuse that never seemed to hold water. Work ran long, or I went out for drinks with the girls. The excuses were so thin that it made me question if she even cared enough to lie convincingly. Sometimes, she'd waltz in with that fake smile, acting like everything was normal, asking about my day, like we were still the happy couple we used to be. But I could barely even look at her. It didn't take long for the suspicions to take root. My gut was screaming at me, and I couldn't ignore it. There was no way all of this was innocent. I knew Olivia well enough to recognize when she was lying. The way her eyes would glance away when I asked about her day, the forced cheerfulness in her voice. It was all a front. I was sure she was seeing someone else, but I needed proof. I needed to see it for myself before I did something stupid, like confronting her and looking like an insecure idiot. So, I did what any desperate guy would do. I followed her. One Wednesday night, I told her I was working late. She barely paid attention as she got ready for another night out with her friends. I parked a few blocks away, sat in my car, and watched. She walked out of the house looking like she had just stepped off a magazine cover. My stomach turned. I gave her a head start before I followed her at a distance, making sure not to let her see me. She drove across town, and eventually, I found myself parked outside a fancy restaurant, the kind we hadn't been to in years. And there he was, some guy, standing by the door. Tall, cocky smile, like he thought the world owed him something. I watched as Olivia practically floated into his arms, hugging him a little too long. The way they looked at each other, it was a punch to the gut. You know that look? That chemistry between two people? That unspoken connection? Yeah, I saw it. She was laughing, twirling her hair, leaning in close as they talked. It was like I wasn't even part of her life anymore. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A part of me wanted to storm in there, flip the table over, drag Olivia out by her arm, and make a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, watching as they shared a meal, sipped wine, and acted like they were the only two people in the world. When Olivia came home later that night, she had the nerve to walk in with that same smile on her face. "Hey, babe," she said, acting like everything was fine, like she hadn't just spent the last few hours wrapped up with another guy while I sat there, losing my mind. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't have the patience to pretend to be okay with it. Where the hell were you? I spat, unable to hold back the anger. She gave me that rehearsed look of surprise, like I had just asked the dumbest question ever. I told you, Ethan. I was out with the girls. Bullshit. I snapped. You were with some guy. I saw you. Her face dropped for a second, like she hadn't expected to be caught so soon. But she quickly recovered, narrowing her eyes and getting defensive. Are you following me now? Jesus, Ethan, what's your problem? We agreed to try this. You can't accuse me of cheating when we have an open marriage. An open marriage? She said it like it was a magic pass that made everything okay. Like once I'd reluctantly agreed, she could do whatever she wanted without question. I felt my anger surge, boiling over. Open doesn't mean sneaking around behind my back. I shot back. I never agreed to this. Her expression hardened, her eyes cold. Maybe you should figure out what you really want, Ethan. This back and forth isn't working. You're either in or you're out. And just like that, it was a challenge. A dare to see if I could handle her adventure, if I could accept everything she was doing. But I wasn't ready to make that call, not yet. So instead, I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. Olivia stood there, that smug look on her face like she was winning some twisted game she thought we were playing. After that blow-up with Olivia, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just sit back and let her walk all over me. I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed. Her with some guy while I sat in the parking lot like a fool. I was angry, humiliated, and sick of pretending to be the understanding husband. Ever have that moment when you know you've had enough? You ever hit that breaking point where you just can't take it anymore, and you stop trying to make sense of the chaos? That's where I was. All I could think about now was how to flip the script, make Olivia feel the same pain she had been dishing out. And what better way to do it than to take her own messed up idea of an open relationship and turn it back on her? Fine. You want this kind of life, Olivia? Let's see how you handle it when I get in on the action too. The idea felt wrong, dirty even, but imagining the look on her face when she realized she wasn't the only one calling the shots, it gave me a sick sort of satisfaction. I dove into the dating scene, hoping to find someone willing to get involved in my little act of revenge. But I quickly realized it wasn't as easy as I thought. After all, I hadn't been out there in a while. At first, it was awkward. I was that guy in the bar, clearly out of my element, struggling with small talk and trying to figure out what to do with my hands. And dating apps? Don't even get me started. Half of them felt like scams, and the other half just made me feel like a fish out of water. Every profile I swiped through reminded me how much time had passed since I'd been part of the scene. But I was determined. For weeks, I found myself at bars, hanging around happy hours, chatting online, anything to keep up with what Olivia was doing. It became this twisted race. Who could open up more? Even if I wasn't being fully transparent about it. But honestly, it felt like walking through quicksand. Most women were either turned off by the idea of a married guy, or they'd disappear as soon as they found out about the open marriage. I didn't blame them. The whole situation reeked of drama. Then I met Ava. At that point, I was ready to quit, but I found her on a dating app. Her profile was direct. No strings attached, just looking to have a good time. I didn't think much of it when I sent a message, but to my surprise, we hit it off. She had this bold, take-no-prisoners attitude, a sharp sense of humor, and a laugh that felt like a break from the mess I was living in. We started talking every day and eventually met up for drinks. Ava was different. She had this confidence, this I don't care what anyone thinks vibe that was impossible to ignore. And when I mentioned Olivia and the whole disaster of the open relationship, she didn't even flinch. She leaned in, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. And as I spilled all the details, what had led up to this, how it made me feel, she was hooked, like my marriage was the latest episode of a soap opera she couldn't wait to watch. I wasn't sure if I should be moved by her interest or embarrassed by how much of a mess my life had become. Let me get this straight, she said, swirling her drink as she processed everything. Your wife wants an open marriage, but she flips out when you have an issue with her going out with some guy? Pretty much. I muttered, a mix of frustration and shame bubbling up. Ava chuckled, shaking her head. Sounds like she wants all the perks with none of the consequences. Classic. And that's when she dropped the bomb. The wild, reckless idea that would completely flip everything upside down. Why don't you give her a taste of her own medicine? She suggested, leaning in with a grin that sent a jolt through me. Invite me over. Introduce me as your special friend. Then let's see how she reacts when things get cozy between us. She raised an eyebrow, waiting for my response. I was floored. The sheer audacity of it all. It was like she'd handed me the perfect tool to get back at Olivia. I was about to turn the chaos Olivia brought into our lives right back on her. But then doubt crept in. Was I really going to go through with this? I was angry, no, furious, but was I the type of guy who would stoop this low? What would it even achieve? Ava could see my hesitation. Don't overthink it, she said, sensing my inner conflict. She opened this door. She can't be mad when you walk through it. Besides, she added with a playful smirk, it's about time you got a win in this mess. Let me help you. A win? That's exactly what it felt like. Finally having some control in a situation where I'd felt powerless for so long. After all, Olivia practically dared me to live this open lifestyle. Why not give her what she asked for? Or, at least, what she thought she was asking for. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If this was the game Olivia wanted to play, maybe it was time for me to play it better. So, I agreed. Over the next few weeks, Ava and I kept meeting up, casual drinks, some talking, a kiss here and there. But as we spent more time together, the lines between revenge and something deeper started to blur. It felt freeing, like I was finally getting some of my dignity back. And Ava? She was all in, completely up for the ride. She teased me, joking about the look on Olivia's face when she'd walk in and find us together. The plan was simple. I'd invite Ava over for a small get-together with a few friends. When the moment was right, I'd put my arm around her, kiss her in front of Olivia, and watch the fireworks. This was going to be the big moment. The dramatic reveal where I'd expose Olivia's hypocrisy for everyone to see. But as the day approached, doubts started to creep in. Was this really me? Was I going to go through with it? Sure, Olivia deserved to be called out, but was I really going to make a public spectacle of everything? Every time I thought about it, I'd swing from feeling like a hero to feeling like a total jerk. And yet, I couldn't ignore the rush. The idea of finally taking control, of standing up for myself, and showing Olivia that I wasn't going to just roll over. It was intoxicating. The day of the party came, and I was a nervous wreck. Olivia didn't suspect a thing. She left that morning like everything was fine, and I stayed behind to get everything ready. Ava showed up early, looking stunning and ready to play her part. I could see the excitement in her eyes, and honestly, it was contagious. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in charge of my own story. When Olivia finally walked through the door, I was ready. I was ready. Ready to watch Olivia's perfect little world crumble. Ready to make her face the consequences of the freedom she'd wanted so badly. And Ava? She was by my side, playing her role flawlessly. But when Olivia walked through that door, I realized something important. No amount of preparation could have truly prepared me for what was about to unfold. The plan had been set in motion, and as the hours dragged on, my nerves were on fire. I'd run the scenario through my mind 1,000 times. Olivia walks in, sees me with Ava, chaos erupts. But when the moment actually arrived, nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. It felt like a freight train barreling toward me, and I was standing on the tracks, daring it to hit. The party started off innocent enough. A few friends came by, beers in hand, laughter filling the room. But none of that mattered. The only thing on my mind was what would happen the moment Olivia walked through that door. And Ava, she was a pro. Flirty, magnetic, effortlessly charming. We shared stolen glances, light touches, little knowing smiles that seemed innocent to everyone else, but to me, it was more. This wasn't just a casual party for me. It was high stakes. I was playing a game where the prize was my dignity, and I was risking it all. Then it happened. The keys jingled at the door, and time seemed to slow. Olivia stepped in, looking exactly as she always did after work. Confident, a little tired, but completely unaware. For a second, she wore a mask of surprise, like she'd forgotten I was hosting people. But then her gaze landed on Ava. She didn't blow up immediately, which threw me off guard. Olivia's smart, calculating. She didn't dive into confrontation without first sizing up the situation. Instead of storming in and creating a scene, She gave me this tight-lipped smile and started making the rounds, saying her hellos, trying to act like everything was fine. I couldn't help but be impressed by her composure, almost impressed. But I knew better. I saw how her eyes flicked toward Ava, cold and calculating. She was sizing her up, trying to figure out who this woman was and why she was so cozy with her husband. It felt like watching a volcano right before it erupts, and all I could do was poke it a little harder. When Olivia finally made her way over to us, she flashed that fake, sugary smile and asked, "So, are you going to introduce me to your friend?" The tension in the room was thick. You could almost taste it. You could feel the crackle in the air as she stared at Ava, trying to make sense of this stranger in her house. "Oh, this is Ava," I said, trying to sound casual, like this was no big deal. "She's, well, my date for the night." I threw that out like a live grenade, knowing exactly how Olivia would react. And sure enough, it hit her like a sucker punch. For a moment, her face went white, like she couldn't process what she'd just heard. But she recovered quickly, too quickly. She forced a laugh, trying to brush it off like it was some joke. "Really? Your date?" she said, her voice shaky but trying to steady itself. "So, this is what an open relationship looks like to you?" Ava didn't miss a beat. She leaned in closer to me, her hand resting on my arm as she gave Olivia a cheeky, knowing smile. "Well, Ethan did say you were the one who suggested it," she said, batting her eyelashes like they were in on some big secret. "I think it's such a progressive idea." That was the match to the fuse. Olivia's face twisted into a snarl, and all that fake composure shattered in an instant. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" she exploded. "You think it's funny to bring some slut into our home? You think humiliating me like this is some kind of joke?" I knew she was going to explode, but seeing it happen, hearing the fury in her voice, it made my heart pound in my chest. But I stayed calm, calmer than I ever thought I could be. "I'm just playing by the rules now," I said, my voice even. "You're the one who wanted an open relationship, remember? Well, here I am trying to make it work." The look in her eyes was pure, unfiltered rage. She opened her mouth to retort, but the words seemed to die on her lips, like she couldn't spit them out without choking on her own anger. And that's when Ava made her move. She turned to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me hard. And it wasn't a casual kiss. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind that left no room for misunderstandings. Olivia's reaction was instant. She let out a half scream, half sob, and shoved the coffee table with such force that the drinks went flying. "You piece of shit," she screamed, her voice breaking. "I knew you were pathetic, but I didn't think you'd stoop this low." I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, like I'd finally flipped the script, made her see just how messed up this whole situation was. But it didn't feel good. Not really. Watching her storm out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, it didn't feel like victory. It just felt hollow. All the pain, the anger, led to this ugly, final moment. And once Olivia was gone, there was nothing left. The party fizzled out after that. Our friends, clearly uncomfortable, made their excuses and left, leaving Ava and me alone in the living room. She looked at me, that knowing smile still on her face like she could read every thought in my head. "That was intense," she said softly, brushing a hand through her hair. "You okay?" I let out a shaky breath, not sure how to answer that. Was I okay? No, not really. I was a mess of emotions, relief, regret, anger, confusion, sadness. That's what lingered in the air. But there was something else I knew for certain. I wasn't sorry for what I'd done. Olivia had pushed me to the edge, and for the first time I'd pushed back. "Yeah," I said quietly, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I think I needed to do that." Ava walked over, wrapping her arms around me, pulling me close. It felt good to be held, to feel someone's warmth after everything that had gone down. She looked up at me with those playful, bright eyes and said, "Well, if it helps, you did great." Then she kissed me again. This time, it was slower, with a tenderness that felt like a balm to the chaos swirling around us. We ended up on the couch, tangled in each other, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself relax. Let myself feel something other than anger and pain. When Ava whispered, "Why don't we go upstairs?" I didn't hesitate. I needed this. Needed to lose myself in someone else, to escape from the nightmare that my marriage had become. The night that followed was intense, the kind of reckless freedom that comes when all your pent-up rage and frustration pour into something, anything, to make you feel alive again. The tension of the past few weeks released in one passionate, wild night. And for those few hours, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Freedom. It was dangerous and fleeting, but in that moment, it felt like I was breaking free. But the morning after hit me like a ton of bricks. Reality came crashing down, sharp and brutal. The clarity that followed was the kind that only comes when the anger subsides, leaving you alone with the mess you've made. Olivia was gone. Not out for a walk or at work, but completely gone. No texts, no calls, silence. And I knew why. The night before had crossed the line. The thrill of revenge had given way to a sinking feeling deep inside me, like I'd nailed the final coffin in the grave of our marriage. The next few days passed in a blur, with me replaying every detail in my mind. The kiss, the screaming, the slam of the door. I couldn't shake Olivia's face from my thoughts. The fury, the hurt in her eyes when she realized what had happened. And as much as I hated to admit it, guilt started creeping in. I felt guilty for the show I'd put on, guilty for dragging Ava into it, guilty for being the man I never wanted to become. But at the same time, there was this part of me that knew this was the inevitable end of something that had already died. It wasn't just one night that had killed our marriage. It had been dying for months, maybe years. When Olivia finally returned, it wasn't with any kind of apology. No, she walked in like a storm, angry, sharp, ready to lash out. Her expression was cold, every word dripping with contempt. "So this is who you are now?" She spat, her voice sharp as she took in the scene. "Some pathetic asshole who needs to put on a show to feel like a man?" I tried to stay calm, but the anger flared up again, just as quickly. "Don't you dare turn this around on me, Olivia," I shot back, my voice rising. "I did what you asked. This is what you wanted, right? An open relationship? Or was that just an excuse for you to screw around behind my back?" "Oh, don't act all innocent," she fired back, practically shaking with rage. "You didn't have to do that. Bringing her here, flaunting it in my face. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "Humiliating?" I yelled, finally losing my patience. "How do you think I felt for months, Olivia? Knowing my wife was out with some other guy, pretending it was all for the good of our marriage? Give me a break. You got what you asked for, and now you can't handle it." We went back and forth, each word we exchanged stoking the fire. It was like we were speaking in different languages. Nothing we said made sense to the other. She accused me of being insecure, of ruining what could have been a beautiful new chapter for us. I threw her lies right back at her, calling her out for turning our marriage into a joke. The anger, the resentment, everything we'd been bottling up for months came pouring out. By the end of it, we were both out of breath, standing there like two boxers after the final round, neither willing to back down. And then the silence. The realization that there was nothing left to say. "Maybe we should just end it," I said, the words bitter on my tongue. "Maybe we're better off without each other." Olivia didn't flinch. She just nodded, her jaw tight. "Fine, let's get a divorce." And that was it. Years of marriage, a decade of memories, all reduced to one angry, impulsive decision. She walked out again, this time for good. I wanted to chase after her, to fix everything, to take back every word I'd said, but I didn't. I just stood there, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath me. What followed was a blur of legal battles, lawyers, asset division, paperwork. We split everything. The house, the savings, everything we collected over the years. If you think that sounds clinical and easy, you'd be dead wrong. Every meeting felt like ripping open a wound that would never fully heal. There were days I'd leave the lawyer's office and just drive aimlessly, not knowing where to go, my head spinning with all the what-ifs and regrets. Our friends? Well, they all picked sides. Some stood by me, saying I was right to stand up for myself, that Olivia had pushed me too far. Others sided with her, calling me an asshole for how I'd handled things, for dragging Ava into it. It felt like our entire social circle had been divided, and suddenly Everyone had something to say about our marriage, like it was some public spectacle they could judge from a distance. And Olivia? Well, she was off living her life far away from me. The last I heard, she'd moved in with the guy from the restaurant. Guess it wasn't just a fling after all. She stopped reaching out. No more attempts to talk, no more gestures to make amends. It was as if she'd finally found what she was looking for, and I was just the leftover baggage she had to discard. Part of me felt relief. At least she wasn't pretending anymore. But the other part, the part that still remembered the good times, the part that still cared for her, that part felt like it was being slowly crushed. Starting over wasn't easy. I moved out of the house. It felt tainted, the memories too heavy to carry. I found a small apartment across town, far enough to not run into Olivia, but still close enough to keep her lingering in my thoughts. I threw myself into work, desperate to fill the empty spaces with anything that would stop my mind from spiraling. But no matter how hard I tried, the past followed me everywhere. The apartment felt like a ghost town. The weekends stretched endlessly, and every quiet moment seemed to remind me of the life I'd once had. Sometimes, I'd scroll through old photos, vacations, family holidays, times when we had no idea how fragile our happiness was. I'd look at them and wonder how everything had unraveled so quickly. How we went from two people deeply in love to two strangers who couldn't stand to share the same space. And then, I'd shove those thoughts aside, focus on anything else just to keep myself from sinking into regret. I did see Ava a few times, but it wasn't the same. The spark we shared, the excitement of something new, quickly faded. She was a great distraction, don't get me wrong, but she wasn't Olivia, and we both knew it. Eventually, we drifted apart. I didn't stop it. It felt like it was for the best. I needed time to heal, to figure out who I was without the weight of a broken marriage around my neck. I couldn't drag her into my mess. So, I let go. And here I am, trying to rebuild my life, trying to figure out what comes next. Some days, it feels like I'm free, like a weight has been lifted, like I can breathe again. Other days, it's like I'm wading through thick fog, not sure where I'm headed or if I'll ever truly feel okay again. But there's one thing I'm sure of. This isn't the end. The story doesn't end here. And maybe, just maybe, there's something better waiting for me on the other side of this. Leaving town after the divorce felt like ripping off a Band-Aid. Painful, but necessary. I moved to a new city, started fresh with a new job, and tried to focus on living my life for the first time in years. The new job wasn't anything remarkable, but it gave me structure, something to hang on to. And with all this newfound free time, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. I threw myself into anything that would take my mind off the past. Hiking, running, hitting the gym. It was like I was rediscovering who I was without the constant weight of a failed marriage weighing me down. Ava and I met up a few times after that, but it didn't take long to realize that whatever connection we had was built on shaky ground. She was great, but I wasn't ready for anything serious. Too much baggage, too much healing left to do. So, we parted ways quietly. No hard feelings, just a mutual understanding that we were both still picking up the pieces of our lives. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, thinking about Olivia, not the woman I fought with, but the one I fell in love with. The woman who made me laugh, who I once couldn't picture a day without. But I had to remind myself, this was over. She was gone, and that was a choice we both made. Eventually, those thoughts didn't hurt as much. They faded into the background, a dull ache instead of a searing pain. And slowly, I came to understand something important. Revenge, it was empty. It felt satisfying for a moment, but once it was over, all it did was deepen the wound. It didn't bring peace. It didn't bring closure. It only kept the anger alive, looping back and forth until there was nothing left but bitterness. When I finally let go of that, when I stopped waiting for the closure or apologies that would never come, I felt lighter, like a burden had been lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I was truly free. Free from the lies, the drama, the constant tension. I'm not going to pretend it's all sunshine and rainbows. Some days, I still feel the sting of regret. There's still that pull to look back. But I'm moving forward. Day by day, I'm figuring out what happiness looks like for me on my own terms. I'm not chasing anyone or anything. I'm just living my life, learning to be at peace with who I am. And right now, that's more than enough.